What's up guys, Moon Man here, and I am in downtown Eufaula, Alabama today to check out a statue of one of its most famous residents, or should I say, I guess, former residents, Bad Leroy Brown. Not the song, not a man. Leroy Brown was a bass here in the bass fishing capital of the United States of America. So the story goes, Tom Mann, he owned Tom Mann's Fish World, right? That's his flagship business. He was in with like the guys from Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's and stuff. And he was a pro angler and he designed lures. Well, one day on Lake Eufaula here, he actually caught a bass. It was only about a pound. There was nothing special about the bass. He'd caught thousands of bass in his lifetime, but something about this bass to him was special. So he took it and he put it in his fish tank at his flagship store. Well, eventually he grew even more liking to it and he put it in his personal fish tank in his office. Well, he didn't have any special markings. It wasn't any type of different type of, didn't look any different or anything like that, but he could pick him out from any of the other fish in there, any of the other bass. Quite a big fish tank. At some point, the story goes, when he started calling a strawberry trickworm, he taught Leroy how to jump through hoops. This guy was a storyteller, by the way, so who knows what's real and what's not. How to jump through hoops and how to come on command. And Leroy would come to the tank to be fed and to be touched and petted. And he just became really well known in the town. And people would come see him. And, you know, all the bass anglers coming in to do the tournaments here on Lake Eufaula, they'd go and they'd see Tom. And Tom obviously had Leroy. Well, 7 years later, Leroy Brown, being a bass fish, he passed away 1980. And, you know, it was a travesty. So they were going to hold a funeral here in town for Leroy Brown, the fish. There was messages from Hank Williams Jr. and Jerry Reed, the governor of Alabama, declared it a national or statewide day of mourning. And anywhere between, the estimates I've seen, 500 and 1,200 people showed up to his funeral. Except on that day, it started raining really bad. So Tom, they didn't bury him. They had a funeral but didn't bury him. He put him in his freezer to be buried later on. They lined it. They had him a casket made, a personalized casket out of a tackle box, and it was like satin lined, and it was just a casket for Leroy. So they put him in the freezer to be buried at a later time. And actually later that night, overnight tragedy struck as someone stole the body and casket of Bad Leroy Brown. And like a lot of famous bass anglers, a lot of people in the area and all throughout, they combed the streets, they combed everywhere looking for Leroy Brown, trying to find who knew where Leroy was. And Leroy, he was missing for 2 or 3 weeks, and at this point they just assumed he was just gone. And then it was in Oklahoma City. Some airport workers, they were inspecting bags, and they noticed a bag that smelled fishy and weird and really gross. And they opened it. It was like a tackle box, and it was the body of none other than the famous Leroy Brown. Now, unfortunately, they did not save the body of Leroy. It was tossed because it was a fish. But Tom had this statue dedicated to Leroy, and it says, most bass are just fish, but Leroy Brown was something special. And this actually was at Tom Mann's Fish World until he died, and then it was put on display in private hands after that because it was gone. But a few years ago, they had a dedication ceremony here in downtown Eufaula to remember their favorite son. Here on the backside of Leroy, it says, Tom Mann and Ray Scott were both lifelong friends and pioneers of the modern day bass fishing industry. Special thanks to Ray Scott for preserving this special piece of Eufaula history. Love you, Leroy. We're here next to the Leroy statue, or bass fishing capital of the country here, is a little artist-inspired thing of a fishing bass. It's pretty cool. Right next to this largemouth coffee company, which is closed today. It is Sunday. I want to show this because it's kind of cool. It looked really cool at night, but this is Save the Martin Theater. I guess it needs some funds to try to be renovated. So I definitely wanted to show this. Pretty cool. Maybe next time I'm down in here, we can go inside the Martin. Walking through town, there's a lot of these little statues, but here is a little, I want to show this off here before we go on to our next little thing here on this video. The fountain where there's little birds shooting water out. Pretty cool. With the story of Leroy Brown, there is another fish with a name here in Eufaula. It's a little bit larger, but not quite as legendary. Let's go check it out. This is a bass fishing, big bass capital of the world, because this one's actually to scale. They caught a 12-foot, but nah, I'm just fucking with you. This is the one that's called Manny. He is the mascot here of this park, and he is 12 feet. He is to represent and dedicate to being the big bass capital of the world. Like I said, not quite as legendary as Leroy, maybe larger, but not larger than life. Please like, subscribe, and share. Moon Man, he's out.